My family ignored my text about my urgent health crisis to go on a luxurious vacation, until the nurse's call shattered their dream trip into smoke. My name is Amber Williams, and at 31 years old, I never thought I would be sitting alone in a doctor's office, staring at my phone with tears in my eyes. The thyroid tumor needed to come out. But according to my family group chat, their Cabo vacation was more important than driving me home from surgery. What they did not know was that this was not just a simple procedure. My hands trembled as I typed my mistake, wondering how it came to this. I always knew my place in the family hierarchy. My younger sister, Heather, was the baby, the precious one who could do no wrong. My older brother Jake was the only son, the golden child destined for greatness. And I was just Amber, the middle child, the reliable one, the one who always had it together, according to my parents. But that was just the story they told themselves to justify how differently they treated us. Growing up in our suburban Chicago home, the pattern was established early. When Heather wanted ballet lessons, Mom and Dad found the money. When Jake needed a new computer for college, they made it happen. But when I earned a partial scholarship to art school in New York, my dreams took a back seat. Your father threw his back out at work, my mother Sandra told me during my senior year of high school. We need you close to home, Amber. You have always been so responsible. So instead of pursuing my passion in New York, I attended the local community college, rushing home between classes to help care for Dad. Patrick Williams recovered within 6 months. But by then, my scholarship opportunity had evaporated. I told myself it was fine. Family comes first, right? Then there was the time Jake needed money to start his business venture, a mobile app he swore would be the next big thing. He came to me first, not our parents. You always save everything, he said with that charismatic smile. Come on, Amber. This is a sure thing. I will pay you back double. I gave him my savings, $15,000 I had been putting aside for years to eventually go back to school. The app failed within 8 months. The money never came back. When I brought it up a year later, Mom intervened. Why are you being so petty, Amber? Your brother took a risk, and it did not work out. That is life. You do not need to make him feel worse. No one ever seemed concerned about how I felt. Heather was more subtle in her exploitation of our family dynamic. She would call me at 2 in the morning crying about relationship problems, expecting me to talk her through it until dawn. She would volunteer me to babysit her friends' children without asking. She would borrow my clothes and return them stained or damaged. You should be flattered I want to wear your things, she would say when I objected. It is not like you have anywhere special to go anyway. That stung because it contained a grain of truth. Between working full-time as a freelance graphic designer and being the family's emotional support system, I rarely had time for a social life. My last serious relationship ended when Paul got tired of me canceling dates because of family emergencies. Your family takes advantage of you, he said during our breakup conversation. And you let them. I cannot compete with that. I moved out of my parents' house at 26, renting a small one-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes away. It was nothing fancy, just 400 square feet with a kitchenette and a bathroom where the door hit the toilet when you opened it, but it was mine. I painted the walls a soft sage green and set up my workspace by the window that overlooked a small courtyard. My cat, Milo, a gray tabby I rescued from the shelter, kept me company while I worked. My graphic design business barely paid the bills at first, but I was determined to make it work. I took on any project that came my way, often working 16-hour days to meet deadlines. I designed logos for local businesses, created marketing materials for startups, and even illustrated a children's book. Gradually, I built a decent client base and earned enough to live comfortably, if modestly. But the family dynamics never changed. Mom would call asking if I could come over to help Dad set up his new television, even though Jake lived closer. Heather would text asking me to pick up her prescriptions because she was too busy with her part-time job as a yoga instructor. I always said yes because saying no meant enduring guilt trips and passive-aggressive comments for weeks. That is just how families work, my mother would say whenever I tried to establish boundaries. We help each other. Your brother and sister would do the same for you. Except they never did. When I had the flu last winter and could barely get out of bed, no one offered to bring me soup or medicine. When my car broke down in the middle of a snowstorm, Jake was too busy to pick me up, so I paid $60 for an Uber. When I needed someone to talk to after losing a major client, Heather told me she had to go because her favorite television show was starting. I became an expert at hiding my disappointment, at swallowing my hurt. I learned to expect nothing so I would not be let down. I became self-sufficient to a fault, refusing to ask for help even when I genuinely needed it. I was the strong one, after all, the responsible one, the one who had it together. At least that was what they thought. None of them saw me crying in my car after family gatherings. None of them knew about the therapy sessions I started last year, trying to understand why I kept giving to people who only took. None of them realized how lonely I felt, even when surrounded by them at holiday dinners. You are so lucky to be so independent, my mother once told me at Thanksgiving as I washed dishes alone while everyone else watched football. Heather and Jake still need so much guidance. I wanted to throw a plate against the wall and scream that I needed guidance, too. I needed support. I needed someone to put me first just once. But I smiled and nodded because that was what Amber did. Amber kept the peace. Amber did not make waves. Until the day I found the lump in my throat, and everything changed. It was a Tuesday night in April when I first noticed it. I had been working on a deadline project for 14 hours straight, my shoulders hunched over my drawing tablet. When I finally stood to stretch, I caught my reflection in the window. The setting sun cast a strange shadow across my neck, highlighting a small but visible bulge on the right side. I touched it, thinking it might be a trick of the light, but no, there was definitely something there. A firm lump just below my Adam's apple. I swallowed, and it moved with my throat. It is probably nothing, I told Milo, who watched me with his unblinking green eyes, just a swollen gland from being tired. But in the following days, I noticed other things, how I was constantly exhausted despite sleeping 8 hours each night, how I sometimes had to swallow twice to get food down, how my voice sounded raspier during client calls, forcing me to clear my throat repeatedly. After a week of monitoring these symptoms and watching countless medical videos online, I finally made an appointment with my primary care physician. I did not tell my family. There was no point worrying them over what was probably nothing, I reasoned. Besides, Mom was busy planning Heather's birthday celebration, and Dad was focused on Jake's upcoming job interview at a prestigious tech company. Dr. Melissa Carter was a petite woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She examined the lump, pressing her fingers against it from different angles. "How long has this been here, Amber?" she asked, making notes in my chart. "I noticed it about a week ago," I said. "But it could have been there longer." She asked about my symptoms, nodding as I listed them. Then she sat on her stool and looked me directly in the eyes. "I want to send you for an ultrasound and some blood work," she said. "It could be several things, but with a thyroid nodule of this size, we need to rule out anything serious." The word serious hung in the air between us. I wanted to ask if she meant cancer, but I could not make my mouth form the word. "Is there someone who can come with you to these appointments?" she asked gently. I thought about my family, about how my mother would somehow make this about how stressed she was over this situation, about how Heather would offer useless wellness tips and essential oils, about how Jake would awkwardly pat my shoulder and then change the subject. "No," I said. "I will be fine on my own." The ultrasound was scheduled for the following Monday. I lay on the examination table as the technician glided the wand over my neck, the cold gel making me shiver. I watched her face for clues, but her expression remained professionally neutral as she captured images from different angles. "Your doctor will receive the results in a few days," was all she said when she finished. The blood work came next. 5 vials drawn from my left arm, testing for thyroid function, antibodies, and other markers I did not fully understand. I sat alone in the waiting room afterward, drinking apple juice from a tiny box and wondering what was happening inside my body. Dr. Carter called me personally 3 days later. "Amber, I would like you to come in to discuss your results," she said, her voice carefully modulated. Would tomorrow morning work for you? I knew then that it was not good news. Doctors do not call personally with normal results. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake staring at my ceiling, Milo curled against my side as I contemplated all the possibilities. By morning, I had convinced myself of the worst. Dr. Carter confirmed my fears. The ultrasound shows a 4 cm nodule on your right thyroid lobe, she explained, showing me the grainy black and white images. Your blood work indicates some thyroid dysfunction. And given the size and appearance of the nodule, we need to do a biopsy to determine if it is cancerous. Cancer, I finally said the word out loud. You think I have cancer? I think we need more information, she replied diplomatically. Thyroid nodules are common, and most are benign, but we need to be thorough. The fine needle aspiration biopsy was scheduled for the following week. I researched the procedure extensively, learning that a thin needle would be inserted into the nodule to extract cells for examination. I read that it was relatively quick and only moderately painful. What the articles did not mention was how vulnerable I would feel lying on the table with my neck exposed, alone in a room full of strangers about to stick a needle into my throat. The radiologist narrated each step as he worked. Small pinch for the local anesthetic. Now some pressure as we insert the sampling needle. Hold very still. I focused on a water stain on the ceiling that vaguely resembled a rabbit. The discomfort was more than I expected, a sharp, persistent pain that made my eyes water. The nurse noticed and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You are doing great, she encouraged. Almost done. Afterward, I sat in my car for 20 minutes before driving home, an ice pack against my neck and fear sitting heavy in my chest. The radiologist said I would have results within 72 hours. 3 days of waiting, of wondering, of worst-case scenarios playing through my mind. I told my family I had a sore throat when I skipped Sunday dinner that weekend. It was easier than explaining what was really happening, easier than watching their faces shift from concern to relief when they realized it did not require any action on their part. The call came on Tuesday afternoon. I was between client meetings when Dr. Carter's number appeared on my phone screen. I stepped onto my small balcony, closing the door behind me so Milo would not escape. Amber, I have your biopsy results, Dr. Carter began, and I could tell by her tone that my life was about to change. The pathology shows papillary thyroid carcinoma. It is a form of thyroid cancer. I sank onto my balcony chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. The good news, she continued, is that this type of thyroid cancer is highly treatable, especially when caught early. You will need surgery to remove the affected part of your thyroid, possibly the entire gland, depending on what the surgeon finds. She continued talking about treatment plans and specialists, but her words became a blur of medical terminology. All I could think was, I have cancer. I have cancer, and I am completely alone. Do you have any questions, Amber? Dr. Carter asked, pulling me back to the conversation. How soon does the surgery need to happen? I managed to ask. As soon as possible. I will refer you to Dr. Thompson, one of the best thyroid surgeons in the area. His office will contact you today to schedule a consultation. As predicted, Dr. Thompson's assistant called me within hours. The consultation was set for Thursday, and the earliest surgery date available was the 15th, just 2 weeks away. It was only after I hung up that I realized the practical implications. The surgery would be outpatient, but I would not be allowed to drive myself home due to the anesthesia. I would need someone to pick me up and stay with me at least the first night. I would need to ask for help from my family. The thought made my stomach clench. I spent that evening pacing my apartment, rehearsing different ways to ask my family for help. Should I call my mother directly? Should I text my siblings individually? Should I downplay the seriousness to avoid drama or be honest about my diagnosis? In the end, I decided the family group chat would be best. That way, they could coordinate among themselves to figure out who was available. Plus, it felt less vulnerable somehow, less like I was specifically asking any one person to step up. I sat on my couch, Milo purring in my lap as I crafted and deleted message after message. Too dramatic, too casual, too detailed, too vague. Finally, at 9:30 p.m., I settled on wording that felt right and hit send. Hey everyone, just wanted to let you know I am having surgery to remove a thyroid nodule on the 15th. It is outpatient, but I will need someone to drive me home afterward. Let me know if anyone is available. I stared at my phone, watching as the message was delivered. 1 check mark. 2 check marks. Then the indicators showing that Mom, Dad, Jake, and Heather had all seen my message. I waited for the typing bubbles to appear, for someone to immediately respond with concern or offers of help. Nothing came. 10 minutes passed, 20, 30. I told myself they might be busy, might be discussing it offline, might be checking their schedules. I tried to focus on an episode of a baking show, but I kept glancing at my silent phone. After 45 minutes, a response finally appeared from Heather. LOL. You actually thought we would miss Cabo for that. We have been planning this trip for months. I stared at her message, reading and rereading it, wondering if I was missing some context or if this was her idea of a joke. Before I could respond, another message appeared, this one from my mother. Do not guilt us, Amber. This trip has been planned for months. Can you reschedule your surgery or ask a friend? The casual cruelty of their responses left me breathless. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, dozens of responses running through my mind. I could explain that this was cancer surgery, not an elective procedure. I could remind them of all the times I had dropped everything to help them. I could beg, plead, or demand the basic courtesy any stranger would offer. Instead, I wrote, my mistake. Then I turned off my phone, curled up on the couch, and sobbed until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen. Milo pressed against me, his furry body warm and solid, the only comfort I had. I called in sick to my virtual client meeting the next morning, something I had never done before. I could not trust my voice not to break, could not trust myself to maintain a professional facade when inside I felt like I was crumbling. Around noon, I finally turned my phone back on. There were no additional messages in the family chat, but I had a missed call from my mother. No voicemail, just the call notification. I debated ignoring it, but knew that would only postpone the inevitable. Taking a deep breath, I called her back. Amber, she answered on the second ring. Are you trying to make me feel bad because it is working? No hello, no how are you, no I am sorry for my insensitive response. Just an accusation that I was manipulating her. Typical. That was not my intention, I said, my voice flat. I just needed a ride home from surgery. Well, you dropped this on us out of nowhere. We have non-refundable deposits for this trip. Your father has been looking forward to it all year. Heather needs the break from her stressful job. Jake is meeting his girlfriend's parents for the first time. Each justification was like a tiny knife between my ribs. Every family member had a reason that mattered except me. It is fine, Mom, I said, though it was anything but fine. I will figure something out. What kind of surgery is it anyway? You never said. I considered telling her the truth, that saying the word cancer would change everything, would make her realize the gravity of what she was dismissing. But something stopped me. Maybe pride. Maybe the realization that I should not have to have cancer for my family to care about me. Just a thyroid thing, I said vaguely. Nothing major. See, you will be fine. You always are. That is what I love about you, Amber. You are so self-sufficient. After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone, wondering when self-sufficiency had become a justification for abandonment. I scrolled through my contacts, considering who else I might ask. My friend circle had dwindled over the years as I prioritized family obligations over social connections. The few friends I still had were mostly out of state or had young children that made last-minute commitments impossible. I called my neighbor, Mrs. Patel, who had already agreed to check on Milo while I was at the hospital. She was a kind 72-year-old widow who often brought me homemade chai. I am so sorry, dear, she said after I explained my situation. I would help if I could, but I do not drive anymore because of my eyesight. I reached out to a former coworker who lived in the area, but she had a conference that day. I called a cousin who lived an hour away, but he had children and could not find child care on such short notice. After exhausting all possibilities, I researched medical transportation services. They were expensive, $300 for a simple pickup and drop-off, but it seemed to be my only option. I booked the service, putting it on my credit card that was already strained from medical bills my insurance did not fully cover. That night, I received a text from Jake, the first direct communication from him since my announcement. "Hey, sorry about the surgery thing. Bad timing with Cabo and all. You need anything before we leave?" It was the closest thing to concern any of them had shown, but it still missed the mark completely. He could offer to pick up groceries before their trip but not change his plans to help during an actual medical crisis. "I am all set," I replied. "Have fun in Cabo." He sent back a thumbs up emoji. No further questions about my surgery, my recovery, or my well-being. The next day, Heather posted in the family chat about the new swimsuit she had bought for the trip, complete with a selfie in the store's dressing room. Mom responded with heart eyes emojis. Dad commented that she would be the prettiest girl on the beach. No one mentioned my surgery or asked how I was doing. It was as if my medical crisis was an inconvenient footnote, quickly acknowledged and just as quickly forgotten in favor of vacation plans. I muted the chat after that, unable to bear the excited vacation countdown messages that followed. The distance I had always felt from my family suddenly seemed like a vast, unbridgeable chasm. I had spent years telling myself that blood was thicker than water, that family was everything. Now I wondered if I had been lying to myself all along. With just under 2 weeks until my surgery, I threw myself into practical preparations. If I was going to do this alone, I would be as prepared as humanly possible. I started by deep cleaning my apartment. I scrubbed the bathroom until it sparkled, changed my bed sheets to the softest ones I owned, and organized my kitchen so everything I might need would be within easy reach. I read that reaching and lifting would be restricted after thyroid surgery, so I rearranged my apartment accordingly, moving essential items from high shelves to counter level. Next came food preparation. I researched what would be easiest to eat with a sore throat after surgery and stocked up accordingly. Applesauce, yogurt, instant mashed potatoes, soup, ice cream, and popsicles filled my refrigerator and freezer. I cooked and froze several soft meals that could be easily reheated in the microwave. I placed a folding tray table next to my couch and set up a recovery station with tissues, lip balm, throat lozenges, a bell in case Mrs. Patel was checking on Milo and I needed to get her attention, and a small whiteboard with marker in case my voice was affected by the surgery. The pharmacy was my next stop. I filled the prescription for pain medication Dr. Thompson had provided in advance, purchased extra gauze and medical tape for wound care, and stocked up on throat sprays and cold packs. The pharmacist raised an eyebrow at my purchases. "Big surgery coming up?" he asked as he rang me up. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak about it to a stranger without getting emotional. "Good luck," he said kindly. "Make sure whoever is taking care of you knows when to give the medications." I just smiled weakly and took my bags. My work situation needed addressing as well. I emailed my clients explaining that I would be unavailable for at least a week due to a medical procedure. Most were understanding, though one expressed frustration at the timing. I worked overtime to complete urgent projects in advance, staying up until 2 a.m. several nights in a row to meet deadlines. It was exhausting, but better than losing clients or income one desperately needed, especially with mounting medical bills. Mrs. Patel agreed to check on Milo twice daily and give him his medication for the feline urinary tract condition he had developed earlier that year. I wrote detailed instructions and packaged his food into individual portions. I even recorded myself calling his name so Mrs. Patel could play it if he seemed lonely. "You think of everything," she said when I showed her my preparations. "But who is thinking of you, dear?" I did not have an answer for that. The day before my consultation with Dr. Thompson, I received another call from my mother. "Just checking in before we leave tomorrow," she said brightly. "We will be gone for 10 days. Jake is watching the house, but he will be staying at his girlfriend's most nights. Oh, and we are turning off our international data to avoid charges, so we will only be on Wi-Fi at the resort." I will send lots of pictures. She did not mention my surgery once during the 5-minute call. When I hung up, I wondered if they had forgotten about it entirely or if they were deliberately avoiding the subject to minimize their guilt. The consultation with Dr. Thompson was sobering. He was a tall man with silver hair and a direct manner that I appreciated. He explained the procedure in detail using diagrams to show exactly what would happen. Based on the size and nature of your tumor, we will likely need to remove the entire right lobe of your thyroid and possibly the left as well, depending on what we find during surgery. He explained there is a small risk of damage to the laryngeal nerves which could affect your voice temporarily or, in rare cases, permanently. He continued listing potential complications: bleeding, infection, calcium imbalances, the need for lifelong thyroid replacement hormones. "Do you have any questions?" he asked when he finished. I had dozens, but one took precedence. "How bad is the recovery?" "I will be managing it alone." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Alone? That is not ideal. The first 24 to 72 hours are the most critical. You will be weak from anesthesia, in pain, and there is a small risk of post-operative bleeding that would require immediate medical attention." "Is there absolutely no one who can stay with you?" The judgment in his tone, however slight, made me defensive. "I have made arrangements," I said, not mentioning that those arrangements consisted of an elderly neighbor checking in and a medical transport service I could barely afford. Dr. Thompson did not look convinced, but he continued. "You will need to sign an informed consent form. Since you do not have anyone accompanying you today, I will need you to read it carefully and ask any questions now." I signed the papers with a steady hand, though inside I felt anything but steady. This was really happening. I was having cancer surgery, and I was doing it completely alone. As I was preparing to leave, the nurse who had been assisting Dr. Thompson, Christine, followed me into the hallway. "Amber," she said quietly, "I could not help overhearing that you do not have support for your recovery. I want you to have my direct number. If you have any concerns after surgery, day or night, please call me." Her kindness nearly broke me. I took the card with her number, blinking rapidly to keep tears at bay. "Thank you," I managed to say. "Is there really no family member or friend who could be notified about the severity of your condition?" she pressed gently. "Sometimes people do not understand the seriousness of thyroid cancer." "They are on vacation," I said, the words sounding ridiculous even to my own ears. "In Cabo. It was planned months ago." Christine's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Would you like me to call them?" Sometimes hearing it from a medical professional makes the situation clearer. For a moment, I was tempted, so tempted to let her call my mother and explain exactly what was happening, to force my family to confront their callousness. But my pride, the same stubborn pride that had kept me self-sufficient all these years, would not allow it. "No," I said firmly. "I do not want to ruin their trip. I will be fine on my own. I always am." As I drove home, Christine's offer replayed in my mind. Why was I protecting people who had shown so clearly that they would not do the same for me? Why was I still, even now, putting their happiness above my own well-being? I did not have answers, only the familiar ache of being the responsible one, the strong one, the one who never needed anything, even when I needed everything. The morning of my surgery arrived with a spectacular sunrise, pink and gold streaks painting the sky as I sipped the last water I was allowed before the procedure. I had been up since 4 a.m., too anxious to sleep. Now, at 5:30, I was dressed in loose, comfortable clothes with a button-up shirt as recommended for post-surgery. My hospital bag was packed with essentials: phone charger, headphones, lip balm, a small pillow to hold against my throat during the ride home. The medical transport service was scheduled to pick me up at 6:15. As I waited, I checked my phone one last time. No messages from my family. They were probably enjoying their first full day in Cabo, drinking margaritas by the pool, completely unconcerned about what I was facing. The transport arrived precisely on time, a white van with a uniformed driver who was professionally polite but not particularly warm. I sat in silence during the 20-minute drive to the hospital, watching the city wake up around us. At the hospital, I checked in at the surgical reception desk where a kind older woman with purple reading glasses helped me through the paperwork. "Your husband parking the car, honey?" she asked as she processed my forms. "No," I said simply. "I came alone." Her smile faltered for just a moment. "Well, someone is picking you up after, right? You cannot drive yourself after anesthesia. Hospital policy." "I have arranged transport," I assured her. She nodded and handed me a pager. "This will buzz when they are ready for you. You can wait over there." The surgical waiting room was already half full despite the early hour. Patients with their spouses, parents with children, elderly people with adult sons and daughters, everyone had someone. Everyone except me. I found a seat in the corner and tried to distract myself with a magazine, but I could not focus on the words. Instead, I watched the other patients, observing their support systems in action, a husband gently rubbing his wife's back, a daughter holding her elderly father's hand, a couple leaning against each other, drawing strength from their connection. When my pager buzzed, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. A nurse led me to the pre-op area where I changed into a hospital gown and surgical cap. She took my vitals, inserted in 4-line, and asked me a series of questions to verify my identity and procedure. "Is there someone waiting for you?" she asked as she adjusted my 4-drip. "No," I said, tired of the question and the pitying looks it inevitably prompted. She made a note in my chart without comment, but I saw the slight frown that crossed her face. I was moved to a curtained bay where I would wait until it was time for surgery. Doctors and nurses passed by, checking on other patients, their conversations a comforting background hum. I closed my eyes, trying to calm my racing heart. Amber Williams. I opened my eyes to see Christine, the nurse from Dr. Thompson's office, standing at the foot of my gurney. "Christine, what are you doing here?" "I assist Dr. Thompson on surgery days," she explained with a warm smile. "I wanted to check in on you before the procedure." "How are you feeling?" "Nervous," I admitted, "but ready to get it over with." She checked my chart and adjusted my blanket with the practiced ease of someone who had done it countless times. "I see you are still alone," she noted quietly. "As planned," I confirmed. Christine hesitated, then pulled up a stool next to my gurney. "Amber, I hope I am not overstepping, but I am concerned about your postoperative care. This is not a minor procedure. The first 72 hours are critical for monitoring potential complications." "I have transportation arranged," I said, the same answer I had given everyone else. "Transportation is one thing. Proper care is another." She leaned closer, her voice gentle but firm. "You mentioned your family is in Cabo. Have you told them exactly what this surgery is for?" I looked away. "They know I am having thyroid surgery. But do they know it is for cancer?" The word still made my stomach clench. "No," I admitted. I did not want to worry them. Christine placed her hand on mine, a small gesture of comfort that nearly undid me. "Amber, I know it is not my place, but I think they should know. If something were to happen, if you were to have complications." She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. "Would you like me to call them?" she offered. As a medical professional, I could explain the situation objectively. I thought about my family, probably at breakfast now in some beachside restaurant, laughing and planning their day of sun and fun. I thought about the disruption this news would cause. I thought about the guilt they might feel, the resentment their guilt might breed. Then I thought about waking up from anesthesia alone, about struggling to get into my apartment alone, about the possibility of complications with no one to help me. "Maybe you are right," I conceded finally. "If something does happen, they should know why." Christine squeezed my hand. "Do you have a number I can call?" I gave her my mother's cell number, explaining about the international data situation. "She will only get the message when she connects to the resort Wi-Fi." "I will make sure she understands the situation," Christine promised. "Now try to relax. Dr. Thompson is the best, and I will be right there in the operating room with you." As she walked away, I felt a strange lightness. Whatever happened next, at least I would not be carrying the burden of secrecy anymore. A series of medical personnel visited me in quick succession after that. The anesthesiologist explained what medications I would receive. A surgical resident confirmed my procedure details. Dr. Thompson himself stopped by briefly to answer any last-minute questions. And then it was time. They wheeled me into the operating room, a cold, brightly lit space filled with intimidating equipment. The team worked efficiently around me, attaching monitors and adjusting equipment. The anesthesiologist placed a mask over my face. "Take deep breaths, Amber," he instructed. "Count backward from 10. I managed to reach 7 before darkness claimed me. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the pre-op area, Christine was making the call that would change everything. "Hello, Mrs. Williams. My name is Christine Reyes. I am a nurse at Memorial Hospital working with Dr. Thompson. I am calling about your daughter, Amber." In a beachside resort thousands of miles away, Sandra Williams excused herself from the breakfast table to take the call in private, annoyed at the interruption of her vacation. She had no idea that what she was about to hear would make her abandon the beach chair she had claimed at 7 a.m., the snorkeling excursion she had booked, and the 5-star dinner reservation that had required a 2-month waiting list. "What do you mean cancer?" Sandra's voice echoed in the resort hallway. She never said anything about cancer. Christine's voice was professionally calm but firm. "Amber has papillary thyroid carcinoma. Dr. Thompson is removing the tumor and likely her entire thyroid gland as we speak. This is a serious procedure with potential complications, including damage to the laryngeal nerves which control the voice box and risk of postoperative bleeding." But she said it was just a minor procedure, that she just needed a ride home, Sandra protested weakly. "Mrs. Williams, your daughter will need close monitoring for at least 72 hours post-surgery. She currently has no one to provide that care. She arranged medical transport and has a neighbor checking in, but that is insufficient for her medical needs." There was a long pause on the line. "I had no idea," Sandra finally said, her voice small. "We would never have, if we had known." "I understand this is a shock," Christine acknowledged. "But there is still time to make arrangements. Amber will be in recovery for several hours." "We will be there," Sandra said firmly. "All of us. Thank you for calling, nurse. Thank you for telling us what our daughter would not." As Sandra rushed back to the table to inform her husband and children of the situation, Amber was under anesthesia, unaware that the dynamics of her family were about to shift dramatically. The journey back to consciousness was slow and disorienting. My first awareness was of a rhythmic beeping somewhere nearby. Then came the pain, a burning, throbbing sensation across my throat. I tried to swallow and immediately regretted it. "Easy there," a gentle voice cautioned. "Try not to swallow too much right now." I blinked several times, trying to bring the world into focus. A recovery room nurse in blue scrubs was adjusting something on my stand. "Surgery's all done," she informed me with practiced cheerfulness. "Dr. Thompson will be by to speak with you once you're more awake." I wanted to ask questions, but my throat felt like I had swallowed broken glass. The nurse seemed to understand. "Your surgery went well. They removed the entire thyroid but were able to preserve the parathyroid glands and the laryngeal nerves. You're going to be just fine." I gave a tiny nod, which sent another wave of pain through my neck. "I'll get you some ice chips for your throat," the nurse said, patting my hand before stepping away. As my senses slowly returned, I became aware of a warm pressure on my right hand. Someone was holding it. I turned my head slightly, wincing at the movement, and saw a figure slumped in a chair beside my bed, their head resting on the edge of the mattress near my arm. It took my foggy brain several moments to process what I was seeing: dark hair streaked with familiar silver highlights, the chunky turquoise bracelet I had given her for Mother's Day 3 years ago, the distinctive floral perfume she always wore. Mom? I must be hallucinating. My mother was in Cabo, thousands of miles away, enjoying tropical drinks with little umbrellas in them. She could not possibly be here holding my hand in a recovery room in Chicago. I blinked hard, expecting the vision to disappear. Instead, my mother's head lifted, revealing red-rimmed eyes and tear-stained cheeks. "Amber," she whispered, her voice cracking. Oh, sweetheart, you're awake. I stared at her in confusion, unable to reconcile her presence with what I knew to be true. I tried to speak but only managed a painful croak. Don't try to talk, she urged, reaching for a notepad and pen on the bedside table. The doctor said your throat will be very sore. You can write if you need to tell me something. With a shaking hand, I scrawled a single word, Cabo? Mom's face crumpled. We came back as soon as we heard. Honey, why didn't you tell us it was cancer? Why didn't you tell us how serious it was? Before I could attempt a response, the recovery room curtain was pulled aside, and I saw my father's worried face, followed by Jake and Heather. They all looked exhausted, with the rumpled appearance of people who had traveled long distances in a hurry. She's awake, Mom informed them unnecessarily. They crowded around my bed, their expressions a mix of concern, guilt, and relief. Dad reached out to touch my shoulder gently, as if afraid I might break. Princess, he said, using a nickname he hadn't called me since I was 10. We got here as fast as we could. Jake stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed, hands shoved in his pockets. How are you feeling? He asked, then immediately grimaced at the stupidity of the question. Heather had already started crying. I'm so sorry, Amber. I'm so sorry. I looked from one family member to another, still not quite believing they were really there. I wrote on the notepad again, how? Mom wiped her eyes with a tissue. Your nurse called me. Christine. She told us everything. We were on the next flight out of Cabo. I frowned, trying to process this information through the fog of anesthesia. Christine had called them after all, despite my resistance, and they had actually come. They had abandoned their vacation, their non-refundable deposits, their carefully laid plans, for me. The recovery room nurse returned with ice chips and seemed surprised by the crowd around my bed. Well, looks like you have quite the support team now, she remarked, helping me with a small spoonful of ice. We're her family, Mom stated firmly. We'll be taking care of her. The nurse nodded approvingly. The doctor will be by shortly to discuss post-op care and discharge instructions. As she left, an uncomfortable silence fell over the group. No one seemed to know what to say. Years of unaddressed issues hung in the air between us, temporarily overshadowed by the medical crisis but not erased. I took the notepad again and wrote, "You didn't have to come." Mom read it and looked stricken. Of course we did. You're our daughter. You have cancer. Had, Dad corrected quickly. The doctor told us they got it all out. I wrote again, what about your trip? Screw the trip, Jake said suddenly with uncharacteristic vehemence. It's just a vacation. Heather nodded in agreement, still sniffling. We can go to Cabo anytime. You needed us. I wanted to point out that I had always needed them, that this wasn't the first time I had reached out for help. But my throat hurt too much for a lengthy discussion, and the anesthesia was making it hard to organize my thoughts. Instead, I wrote, "Thank you for coming." It was the polite thing to say, what was expected of me. Good old reliable Amber, always understanding, never making waves. But something had shifted inside me during those long days of facing cancer alone. The realization that I might have died without my family ever truly seeing me had awakened a dormant anger that even gratitude for their current presence couldn't fully extinguish. Dr. Thompson arrived then, clipboard in hand, his surgical cap replaced by neatly combed silver hair. He nodded approvingly at my family before addressing me. The surgery went very well, Amber. We removed the entire thyroid gland as the cancer had spread to both lobes, but it was contained within the thyroid capsule. No evidence of lymph node involvement. You'll need radioactive iodine treatment as a precaution, but the prognosis is excellent. He continued explaining my treatment plan, medication regimen, and follow-up schedule. My family listened intently, my mother taking notes, my father asking detailed questions, Jake and Heather hovering attentively. It was surreal seeing them all so engaged in my care after feeling invisible for so long. I'm particularly glad to see you have support at home, Dr. Thompson concluded, glancing at my family. The first few days of recovery are challenging, and it's important not to be alone. Mom straightened in her chair. She won't be alone for a minute. We'll take care of everything. I closed my eyes, suddenly overwhelmed by emotions I couldn't quite name, relief that I wasn't alone anymore, anger that it took cancer to make my family show up, gratitude for their presence, resentment that it had been conditional. Love and hurt so intertwined I couldn't separate them. When I opened my eyes again, Dr. Thompson had gone, and my family was discussing logistics. Who would stay at my apartment? Who would pick up my prescriptions? Who would handle my follow-up appointments? I can take family leave from work, Mom was saying. I have plenty of sick days saved up. I'll postpone my interviews, Jake offered. They can wait. I can reschedule my yoga classes, Heather added. My students will understand. They were making plans as if their availability had never been in question, as if they hadn't all refused me just days ago. The cognitive dissonance was too much. I picked up the notepad again, my hand shaking with more than just post-surgical weakness. I wrote in large, uneven letters, "Where were you when I asked?" I held up the page, drawing their attention. The conversation stopped abruptly as they read my message. Uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Amber, Mom began hesitantly. We didn't understand how serious it was. I flipped to a new page. You never asked. You said it was just a thyroid thing. Dad protested weakly. You didn't say it was cancer. Another page. You didn't care enough to ask. Tears were streaming down my face now, the emotional dam finally breaking. Years of being overlooked, of being taken for granted, of being the reliable one who never needed anything, it all came pouring out in those written words. Jake looked down, unable to meet my eyes. You're right, he admitted quietly. I saw your message and just thought. I don't know what I thought. That it was routine. I guess that you'd handle it like you handle everything. We've taken you for granted, Mom said, her voice thick with emotion. 4 years. We've relied on your strength without ever considering what it cost you. Heather was openly sobbing now. I've been so selfish, Amber. So wrapped up in my own life that I didn't see how much you were carrying alone. Dad cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional confrontation but making an effort. We failed you, Princess. Not just with this surgery, for a long time. Their acknowledgments should have felt vindicating, but they just made me more tired. I had imagined this moment so many times, my family finally recognizing how unfairly they had treated me. But the reality was messy and painful, complicated by my physical vulnerability and their genuine remorse. I wrote one more message, my hand cramping with the effort. I needed you before this, too. Mom read it and nodded, tears falling onto her cheeks. I know, and we weren't there. We can't change that, but we're here now, and we want to do better. Will you let us try? It wasn't a simple question, and I didn't have a simple answer. The hurt ran too deep for an easy resolution. But as I looked at their faces, truly contrite, truly present, I realized I had a choice. I could hold on to my justified anger, or I could accept this imperfect beginning of change. I gave a small, cautious nod. Mom squeezed my hand gently. Thank you for giving us another chance. We don't deserve it, but we'll work to earn it. For the first time in my adult life, I felt seen by my family, not as the reliable middle child who never needed anything, but as a person with needs and hurts and a right to be prioritized. It wasn't a Hollywood ending. There would be difficult conversations ahead, old patterns to break, new boundaries to establish, but it was a start. The next few weeks were a strange new reality. My apartment, usually quiet except for Milo's occasional meows, became a hub of family activity. Mom moved into my spare room, which had previously functioned as my home office. Dad came by daily, bringing food and helping with household tasks. Jake and Heather took shifts, ensuring someone was always with me during those critical first days of recovery. My throat healed slowly, the angry red line across my neck gradually fading to pink. My voice, initially hoarse and weak, strengthened day by day. The exhaustion from surgery and the adjustment to thyroid medication kept me sleeping much of the time at first, but as my energy returned, so did the need for conversations too long delayed. It happened organically one evening about 2 weeks after my surgery. Mom and I were sitting in my living room, she knitting a scarf, me sketching idly in a notebook, when I finally asked the question that had been lingering between us. "Why did it take something this serious for you to see me?" Mom's hand stilled, the clicking of her knitting needles falling silent. She didn't pretend to misunderstand. "I think," she said slowly, choosing her words with care, "we fell into roles a long time ago. Heather was the baby who needed protection. Jake was the son who needed guidance. And you? You were the one who had it together. The one who didn't need us." "I always needed you," I said, my voice still slightly raspy. "Just because I didn't fall apart doesn't mean I wasn't struggling." Mom nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I know that now. I think part of me knew it then, too. But acknowledging it would have meant admitting how unfair we were being, how much we were taking from you without giving back." She set her knitting aside and looked directly at me. "Your father and I have been talking a lot about this, about how we've treated you differently. It wasn't right, and there's no excuse, but if you're willing to hear it, I'd like to explain some things. Not to justify, just to understand." I nodded, bracing myself. "When you were born, you were such an easy baby, so self-sufficient even then. You would play happily by yourself, rarely cried, hit all your milestones early. We marveled at how independent you were. Then came Jake, who was colicky and demanding, and later Heather, who was premature and needed extra care." She twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit I'd observed throughout my childhood. "Somehow, we started seeing your self-sufficiency not as a quality to nurture, but as permission to focus elsewhere. When you handled things on your own, we felt proud rather than concerned. We mistook your competence for invulnerability." It was a revelation hearing her articulate what I had felt but never fully understood. My strength had become my weakness in our family dynamic. "I'm not invulnerable," I said quietly. "I've been drowning for years." "I know," Mom acknowledged, reaching for my hand. "And I'm so sorry we didn't see it, or worse, that we saw glimpses but looked away because it was easier." The conversation opened a floodgate. Over the following days, similar discussions occurred with Dad, with Jake, with Heather, sometimes heated, sometimes tearful, always necessary. I spoke my truth without filtering it to spare their feelings, something I'd never allowed myself before. "I gave you my savings," I reminded Jake during one particularly difficult conversation. $15,000 that I was saving for art school. You never paid it back, never even acknowledged what it cost me." Jake, to his credit, didn't become defensive. "I took advantage of you," he admitted. "I knew you wouldn't say no. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I want to make it right." He presented me with a repayment plan, modest monthly installments that would eventually return my money with interest. It wasn't a quick fix, but it was acknowledgement and accountability, which meant more than the money itself. Heather and I had our moment of reckoning while she was driving me to a follow-up appointment. "I've been jealous of you," she confessed, surprising me. "You're so capable, so put together. I always felt like the mess by comparison." "I'm not put together," I told her. "I'm just good at pretending. And everyone made it clear that's what was expected of me." She nodded, eyes fixed on the road. "I'm trying to understand my role in all this. I think I liked having you as the responsible one because it let me off the hook. I could be the fun sister, the spontaneous one, while you handled the hard stuff. That's not fair to either of us," I pointed out. "You're an adult. You should get to be responsible sometimes. And I should get to fall apart occasionally without the world ending." "You're right," she agreed. "I want to be someone you can rely on, Amber. I want to be a real sister, not just someone who takes." The final test of these new dynamics came 6 weeks after my surgery when I received my pathology report following the radioactive iodine treatment. I had asked my family to come to my apartment for the discussion. They all arrived promptly, faces anxious but supportive. We sat in my small living room as I opened the envelope containing my results. "No evidence of residual cancer," I read aloud, relief washing over me. "Regular monitoring recommended, but prognosis excellent." The collective exhale was audible. Mom wiped away tears. Dad squeezed my shoulder. Jake and Heather exchanged relieved glances. We should celebrate, Heather suggested. Maybe dinner at that Italian place you like. Actually, I said, gathering my courage, I wanted to talk to you all about something else first. I told them about the art school in New York that still interested me, about how I'd been researching online programs that would allow me to earn my degree while maintaining my freelance business, about my dream that had been deferred but never abandoned. In the old family dynamic, this announcement would have been met with dismissal or token encouragement that masked actual disapproval. But something had shifted fundamentally between us. That's wonderful, Amber, Mom said sincerely. What can we do to help make this happen? Tell us what you need, Dad added. We're all in. Jake offered to help me build a website showcasing my portfolio. Heather volunteered to connect me with a friend who had attended the same program. They were engaged, interested, supportive in practical ways rather than just with empty words. 6 months after my surgery, standing in front of my bathroom mirror examining the now faint scar across my neck, I reflected on how much had changed. My family wasn't perfect. We still had moments of falling into old patterns, still had disagreements and miscommunications. But there was a fundamental difference. I was visible now. My needs mattered. My boundaries were respected. I had learned to speak up without apology, to ask for help without shame, to express disappointment without fear. And my family had learned to listen, to show up consistently, to give back in proportion to what they received. The strangest part was that I didn't regret what happened. Not the cancer, certainly, I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but I didn't regret Christine making that call, forcing the truth into the open. Sometimes it takes the prospect of losing something to recognize its true value. For my family, the possibility of losing me made them see me, perhaps for the first time. And for me, facing my mortality helped me understand that being strong doesn't mean being alone, that self-sufficiency is admirable only when it's a choice, not when it's the only option. That family means nothing if it's conditional. I don't know what would have happened if I had told them myself about the cancer from the beginning. Maybe they would have canceled their trip willingly. Maybe they would have found a way to rationalize still going. It's a question without an answer. What I do know is that sometimes a painful truth is the only thing that can break through years of comfortable illusions. For my family, hearing from Christine that I had cancer while they were on a beach in Cabo was the wake-up call they needed. For me, their response, dropping everything to be by my side, was proof that beneath the neglect and taken for granted dynamic, there was love worth salvaging. I no longer measure my worth by what I can give others or how little I need in return. I've learned that true strength isn't found in silence or self-sacrifice, but in honesty and mutual support. Sometimes letting people see your vulnerability is the bravest thing you can do.